Good evening, ma'am. Good evening, classmates. I am Jodanice Kate A. Fernandez, and allow me to discuss to you the assigned case to me, which is the BELGICA versus OCHOA, GR number 208566, dated November 19, 2013, which this case is under the extent of and limitations on legislative power. Let me cite first the facts of this case. So this case revolves around the constitutionality of Priority Development Assistance Fund, or the PDAF, or what we call the Congressional Pork Barrel System. The PDAF is a lump sum allocated to legislators, allowing them to fund specific projects they deem necessary. So petitioners in this case argue that this system enables politicians to accumulate funds, perpetuating themselves in power and violating some constitutional principles. This system enabled legislators to identify projects, release funds, and realign budgets even after the budget law is enacted. And actually, this case is that long, and due to its complexity, before the court consolidated petitions under the Rule 65 of Rules of Court, all of which usual constitutionality of the pork barrel system, they shall discuss first the conceptual and the underpinnings before detailing the constitutional challenge of this system. Historically, pork barrel is political parlance of American English origin, which means this refers to the appropriation of government spending meant for localized projects and secured solely or primarily to bring money to a representative of a district. On the subject further, this is referred to the legislative control of local appropriations. Going further to some of the brief history of pork barrel, we have here the pre-martial law. During this era was the Act of 3044, which is the Public Work Acts of 1922, which are all the public works be distributed subject to approval of the Senate and the House of Representatives. And then this 1950 post-enactment of legislators' participation to be documented and become broadened to the area of project identification. And then pork barrel also commenced to the civil and local leaders, in which thereafter the Senate and House Representative bills was signed by the President into law. And then here comes the martial law era, in which the Batasang Pambansa introduced a new item of General Appropriation Act, in which the SLDP, or what we call the Support for Local Development Projects, are giving 500,000 to the assemblymen, in which this congressional pork barrel and under this system, it's also including not only public projects but also hard projects and soft projects like the educational, livelihood, health centers, and more. And now, in the post-martial law era, during the administration of Corazon C. Aquino, after the EDSA revolution or the restoration of democracy, the Congressional Pork Barrel revised into Mindanao Development Fund and Visayas Development Fund, in which here comes also the Countrywide Development Fund that has the budget of 2.3 billion. This follows during the Fidel V. Ramos administration, in which here we have the representative budget of 12.5 million and 18 million for senates and 20 million for vice president. So the submission of DBM, which is the 50% for 6 months, and congressional insertion of the DepEd projects, El Nino Fund, and poverty allocation of this time. Follows the Estrada administration, in which the CDF was removed and separate into 3 forms, which are the Food Security Program Fund, Lingap para sa Mahihirap Program Fund, and Rural or Urban Development Infrastructure Program Fund. And now in the year 2000, the Priority Development Assistance Fund appeared in GAA, in which the realignment of funds sole condition is no fund or amount shall be used in personal services or personal benefits. Now in the present administration, in which the legislators, vice presidents, and representatives were given a separate budget, in which is the 70 million, and the breakdown is 40 million for the hard projects and 30 million for the soft projects. And also the LGU became also the implementing agencies. And now here comes the presidential pork barrel in the Philippines, in which this expanded in the inclusion of the budget of the president, which is the Special Fund Section 8 of PD 910 issued by the President Ferdinand E. Marcos, such as the Malampaya Fund and Presidential Social Fund. And this Malampaya Fund is regarding an energy-related project in Palawan. And afterwards, now here comes the different controversies in the Philippines regarding this pork barrel system, which there are already ghost projects na binubulsa na daw ng mga legislators ang budget, which is amounting into 3.6 billion, and also posted in the Philippine Daily Inquirer. Kuha nila sa mga projects nila through kickbacks, like yung mga project nila yung asphalting and dredging, wrapping, and concreting. So with that, the NBI already investigated, and the whistleblower says that it was the JLN that swindled. So yung JLN po is yun yung Janet Lim Napoles, na siya po ang kumuha daw ng mga billion from the ghost projects using 20 dummy accounts from the NGO. That it's supposed to be the NGO, but JLN or Janet Lim Napoles used a dummy account in a representation of NGO. Now, criminal complaints were filed in the Office of the Ombudsman saying that there are 5 lawmakers who committed plunder. 3 of them also committed malversation, and some of the heads of the NGOs and representatives who committed violation of anti-graft and corrupt acts. So in investigation, the COA released 3 years audit to determine the proprietary release funds of the Presidential Development Assistance Funds, which they allege that the Malampaya project, or yes, for the Malampaya funds, already had 900 million from the operation. Dahil dito nagkaroon na ng various and different petitions, like the Alcantara petition na ang pork barrel system daw is to be declared unconstitutional. And now the BELGICA petition was docketed as GR number 208566 on September 3, 2013. And so now the BELGICA et al. And the Jose M. Villegas Jr. filed an urgent petition for certiorari and prohibition with a prayer for the immediate issuance of temporary restraining order and a writ of preliminary injunction dated August 27, 2013 under the Rule 65 of Rules of Court, which is this is now the BELGICA petition, seeking that the annual pork barrel system presently embodied in the provisions of GAA of 2013, which provide for 2013 PDAF and executive lump sums embodied in provisions of this, will be declared unconstitutional. So here, petitioners challenge the constitutionality of Priority Development Assistance Fund and other discrepancy funds and others discretionary funds, arguing that they violated the Constitution by allowing legislators to exercise powers beyond their lawmaking function, specifically post-enactment intervention in budget execution. Here comes the issues in this case, that whether or not the 2013 PDAF article and all other congressional pork barrel laws similar thereto are unconstitutional, considering that they violate the principles of Constitution's provisions on non-delegability of legislative power, undue delegation, and principle of separation of powers. And also, can legislators legally mediate in post-enactment budget execution? With that, the court made a resolution na mag-comment ang mga respondents, and then to be replied again by the petitioners. Kasali din dito sa petitions ni BELGICA and OCHOA and the other petitioners that they also requested some copies from the COA to see the breakdowns of the budget or the funds, and also kung sino pa yung mga involved. And it turned out na hindi ito na-grant ng court, which is kasi case laws instructs that the primary remedy to invoke the right of information is to file a petition of writ of mandamo. So ay nagsasabing hindi basta-basta na i-disclose publicly ang mga information na hindi naman sakop ng isang agency. Ganon. So that's why it was not granted. But then, on the other hand, yung petitioners they appealed as a taxpayers daw, na they are doing their part naman na nagbabayad sila ng mga tax nila. So therefore, since they are taxpayers, they are entitled to know and they have the right, kasi nagagamit naman daw yung pera nila as a taxpayer sa public fund na hindi naman naayon or hindi naman nagagamit ng gusto. So therefore, they are right in this matter. So that's why the court also conducted reviews. So after all the different reviews and arguments between the petitioners and the respondents, the Supreme Court then ruled that the Priority Development Assistance Fund is unconstitutional for the reasons thereto: undue delegation of legislative power, which that the PDAF enables legislator to determine the purpose of appropriations effectively, delegating legislative power to themselves, which is not allowed under Constitution. It held that legislative power is limited to lawmaking, particularly the enactment of the budget through the General Appropriations Act or the GAA. Once the budget is enacted, execution belongs solely to the executive branch. Legislators cannot intervene post-enactment by identifying projects, directing fund releases, or choosing beneficiaries. These are, of course, the executive functions. So the court emphasized that post-enactment authority granted to legislators under the PDAF violates also the separations of powers and undermines accountability and transparency. It also states that in the cases at bar, the court observes that the 2013 PDAF article, insofar as it confers post-enactment identification authority to individual legislators, violate the principle of non-delegability, since said legislators are effectively allowed to individually exercise the power of appropriation, which, as settled in the PhilConsa, is lodged in the Congress. And in view of the foregoing, the legislative branch of the government, much more any of its members, should not cross over the field of implementing the national budget, since, as earlier stated, the same is properly the domain of the executive. Again, in Gingoan Jr., the court stated that the Congress enters the picture when it delivers or acts the budget proposals of the President. Thereafter, Congress, in the exercise of its own judgment and wisdom, formulates an appropriation act precisely following the process established by Constitution, which specify that no money may be paid from the Treasury except in accordance with the appropriation made by law. Upon approval, passage of GAA Congress lawmaking role necessary comes to an end, and from the executive's role of implementation, the national budget begins. So as not blur that the constitutional boundaries between them, Congress must not concern itself with details of implementation by executive. Therefore, the court renders this decision to rectify an error which has been persisted in the chronicles of our history. In the final analysis, the court must strike down the pork barrel system as unconstitutional in view of the inherent defects in the rules within which it operates. And hereby, on September 10, 2013, the court declared that this is permanent. And finally, the court hereby directs all prosecutorial organs of the government to, within the bounds of reasonable dispatch, investigate and accordingly prosecute all government officials and or private individuals for possible criminal offenses related to the irregular, improper, and unlawful disbursement and utilization of all funds under the pork barrel system. The Supreme Court emphasized that any involvement beyond is unconstitutional. So that ends my case about BELGICA versus OCHOA, which was decided on November 19, 2013. And once again, I am Jodanice Fernandez. Thank you so much for your time. I just hope that despite my lackings, I somehow delivered the case well.